They say that drinking too much alcohol can kill, but Jason Tyler is sure that the third beer he drank that night saved his life. Jason's wife, Alexis, was away on a business trip, and Jason was drowning alone in bad TV shows and good beer, something he rarely did if Alexis was home. The third can of beer must have filled his bladder because he usually slept through the night without waking, but that night he woke up to empty it. He looked at the clock on the nightstand. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, and one of the neighbor's dogs was barking, probably the Klein's, whose dog was always outside. Jason wondered what the point of keeping a pet was if it was kept locked up all the time. This was probably just one of many reasons for the arguments between Sal and Mary Klein. Jason was sitting on the edge of the bed, stretching his bad knee, and was just getting up when his ears picked up another strange sound. If his ears weren't deceiving him, his back door was making the creaking noise it makes when it's opened. Too slowly. The hairs stood up on the back of Jason's neck. He decided not to risk it and quickly went to the closet. Hidden above the door was his old Winchester 12-gauge pump shotgun. Jason's father was a police officer back in the 70s and once told Jason that he was trained at the police academy. When you walk into a building late at night, the first thing you do is load a round into the chamber of your shotgun. It is a sound designed to strike fear into the hearts of any villains lurking within. Jason's dad may have been old school, but it seemed like good advice given the current situation. Although Jason couldn't remember the last time he'd been this scared, he did his best to calm himself down, walked to the bedroom door, loaded the first of 3 rounds of buckshot into the chamber, and then shouted down the stairs with some false courage. "Hey, come on up! I have a little surprise for you!" The next sound Jason heard was the door slamming. Jason ran to the back bedroom and looked out the window. Just then, someone was climbing over the fence in the backyard. It was clear 2 nights before the full moon, so although Jason couldn't see a face, it was obvious that it was a man trying to jump the fence. But he had dropped something. Damn, was that a gun? It looks exactly like the gun the guy put back in his pocket before jumping the fence. By this time, the neighbor's dog was going crazy, and the lights came on in the Klein's backyard. Unfortunately, the light did not help identify who was running down the alley. Jason walked back into their bedroom and picked up the phone. 911, state your emergency. Someone just broke into my house. He left and ran away. Are you safe? No, I don't think so. But the guy is running away. Maybe you can catch him. The conversation between Jason and the dispatcher quickly went downhill, Jason wanting the police to respond immediately in hopes of catching the guy, and the dispatcher explaining that it might take a while since he was no longer in danger and there were other priorities at the moment. Jason realized that was driving across the border when he asked the dispatcher if those priorities included stopping for a donut and coffee before arriving at his house. 2 miles away, Sandy Mason sat in a parked car trying to catch his breath. How could everything go so wrong? He had spent the last week preparing for last night, studying the area, planning where to park the car to arouse the least suspicion, and the best route to and from Tyler's house. He knew about this damn dog in the neighbor's yard. That's why he'd walked through the alley at 2 in the morning, the last 3 nights, so that the dog's barking would become a routine. The lack of sleep began to affect his thinking and performance at work. Crap. It's not easy to plan and carry out the perfect murder. This was Sandy's best option for getting rid of Jason Tyler. Sandy wondered how disappointed Alexis would be when she came home from her business trip and discovered that she was still married to that bastard. Alexis won't show it by any outward sign. She's too good at pretending. For the past 6 months, since he'd been transferred to Alexis's department, she'd acted like she wasn't even interested in a relationship with Sandy. But all the signs were there. The way Alexis smiled as she walked through the department, Sandy knew that the secret part of that smile was just for him. And now all their hard work tonight was in vain. Sandy had other options for getting rid of Jason, but they took more time, and Sandy was tired of waiting so long for him and Alexis to be together. Sandy sat in the car, remembering the first time he saw Alexis. It was at a staff meeting, and Alexis was sitting in the chair right next to him. Her skirt rose up a little as she sat down, enough to show off 4 or 5 inches of her thigh before she pulled her skirt back down. She smiled right at him, extended her hand, and introduced herself. "Hi, I'm Alexis Tyler." Just. Then last month he found her in the break room, having lunch with Susan Oster. He asked if he could join them, and Alexis said, "Yes, please join," in her sweet voice, smiling at him again. Alexis continued to talk to Susan, but Sandy knew the words were meant for his benefit. Alexis laughed as she told Susan, "Sometimes I envy you, Susan. Being single is wonderful." Susan's response was a complaint about her last experience with a guy from an online dating service. Susan and Alexis laughed at each other's stories, but Sandy knew that Alexis was being standoffish and was actually telling him how much she wanted to get rid of Jason. Sandy held the key to Tyler's house in his hand. He remembered that morning when she had left it on her desk, a clear invitation for him to take it and make a duplicate. She had been waiting for his report on Gravis audit that morning. When he entered her QB to leave a report, her keys were there. He took the keys, made up an excuse for the department secretary about the emergency, and ran to the store to make a duplicate key to the house. It was not difficult to find out which key opened the house. In half an hour, the duplicate was ready. He returned to the office, but Alexis had already returned from the meeting. Now what? He knew he couldn't just leave the keys on her desk. That would imply a conspiracy between them, and Sandy had watched enough cop dramas to know that was dangerous. What to do? What to do? Finally, a decision came to him. He ran into the parking lot and threw the keys right under Alexis's Honda near the driver's door. Problem solved. Sandy's thoughts returned to the present, right before he was suddenly illuminated by headlights reflected in the rearview mirror. Sandy sat down in the seat as the car drove by. He stood up just in time to see that it was a police cruiser. His heart rate increased, and it took another 10 minutes before he calmed down, started the car, and drove to his apartment. An hour after the 911 call, 2 officers arrived at Tyler's home to investigate the scene and take a report. Officers Jones and Shepard were polite but cold, with little, if any, empathy for Jason's situation. While searching the area with flashlights, the only noticeable fact was that the back door had not been forced open. Jason was sure he'd checked all the doors before going to bed, but it was obvious the police were skeptical. They finished their report and headed to the front door. As Jason closed the door, he heard Officer Jones say, "Well, Peter, I could use a donut and a cup of coffee. It's been almost an hour since my last donut. And you?" Officer Shepard laughed loudly, loud enough to possibly wake up any neighbors still sleeping. Jason was too excited to go back to sleep, so he made a pot of coffee and spent the next 3 hours doing paperwork. At 7 in the morning, he called his wife to wish her good morning. He decided not to scare Alexis with the story of the break-in. He would tell her when she got home in the evening. Her flight was supposed to land at 6:30, and she was on her way to the airport. When 8 in the morning arrived, he called his boss to tell him that he couldn't come to work that day, and why. He called a locksmith to change the locks and install a pair of door alarms. He and Alexis will have to decide whether they should install a security system for their home. The mechanic arrived and finished the job before 1 p.m., and with nothing else to do, Jason headed to the office for the rest of the day. Kevin Smith, Jason's boss, had already told the rest of the office about the break-in at Tyler's house, so the first hour was spent talking with co-workers wanting to discuss what had happened. Finally, Jason managed to calm everyone down and work for several hours. Alexis stood looking at the door. Her key didn't fit. This day was getting worse, and she was furious. The whole trip to Portland was unnecessary, caused by the incompetence of that idiot Sandy Mason. His Graves audit report was filled with so many errors that Donald Graves refuted with documentation. Such incompetence will be reported to the department manager on Friday. 2 days away from her husband and home, because Mason could not or did not want to check his calculations. Donald Graves answered each of her questions with documentation of how the Portland office complied with all company financial policies. She felt lucky that Donald didn't take the visit too personally or upset, and that she was able to catch an early flight from Portland. Being the problem solver she is, Alexis walked around to the back door and tried to insert the key into the lock. Nothing again. Panic seized her. Just a couple of weeks ago, she and Jason were watching the Richard Gere and Diane Lane movie Unfaithful on cable television. They were looking forward to it because their two open relationship actors were in the same movie. An open pass meant that if one of them was in a situation where he could have sex with the actor or actress in question, he could do it without reproach. They also had free passes to musicians and athletes. Alexis had Keith Urban and James Harden. Jason had Joan Jett and Kerry Walsh Jennings. So, spoiler alert, in the film, Diane Lane has an affair with a young French man, and when Richard Gere finds out about it, he stalks the guy and accidentally kills him. After the movie, Jason told Alexis that if she ever cheated on him with anyone other than her 3 free passes, then he shouldn't expect him to fight for her. He'd just change the locks and file for divorce. Now Alexis was faced with the first part of his threat, although she couldn't imagine why, since she had done nothing about it. Alexis took out her phone and called Jason. Luckily, Jason picked up on the second ring, and just as he started to say, "Hey, love," he was interrupted. "Jason, what the hell is going on? My key doesn't fit the locks to the house." Jason was caught off guard and said the first thing that came to his mind, which wasn't the smartest thing he could have said given the situation. "Alexis, I thought you were on a flight at 6:30. What the hell does this have to do with the fact that I can't get into the house? Why were the locks changed? I'll be home in 20 minutes. I'm really sorry. I'll explain when I get there. Just wait, love." "Well, hurry up, because I have to go to the bathroom and my bladder is making me angry." Jason continued to apologize into the phone as he grabbed his keys and ran out the door. Alexis had already hung up. A few traffic violations later, Jason was home in the promised 20 minutes. He ran to the front door and opened it as Alexis was getting out of the car. She gave him her evil look, but still kissed him before walking past him into the living room. Jason walked back to her car to grab her suitcase and briefcase. She already had one of Alexis's favorite ales poured when she entered the kitchen. Seeing her husband with a sheepish smile and a peace proposal, she returned the smile. She hugged her best friend and kissed him. "Okay, now tell me what's going on with the locks." Jason told Alexis about the break-in and everything that had happened since then. Alexis was shocked that she almost lost the love of her life. Tears rolled down her cheeks at the thought of life without this special person. She ended up apologizing to him for being so angry earlier on the phone. The question of whether to install a security system was resolved by Alexis immediately. "Of course we'll install a security system. Katie is coming home from university next weekend, and there's no way I'm letting her be in danger." When Alexis parked in the underground parking lot on Friday morning, she made sure she followed her new routine. Before getting out of the car, she placed a set of keys in the side pocket of her bag. Since she lost her keys last month, she has made sure that the keys are safe. It took her over an hour to find the keys, and only after Susan walked with her, retracing her steps from that morning. She could have sworn she threw the keys on her desk, but she was late for the morning meeting due to the accident on 3rd Avenue, and barely had time to grab Harrison's file before rushing into the meeting. When she returned from that meeting, she looked for them in her coat pockets, under the table, in the conference room she had just left, even in the trash can before Susan walked in because she heard Alexis swearing under her breath. Susan helped her find them under the car. Alexis used the button on the door to lock the car. Jason taught her how to do this after reading an article online about scammers pretending to be in parking lots with a device that could intercept the key fob signal to lock and alarm cars. According to the article, the device could then recreate the car's unique signal, so scammers could unlock and steal whatever was left inside. Alexis walked through the department and past Sandy Mason's cube. He was just looking down the corridor at that moment, and she felt his gaze on her. The small hairs on the back of Alexis's neck stood on end. The guy was simply scaring her. A new employee showed up one morning about 6 months ago, and a staff meeting was about to begin when she walked into the conference room. There was only one chair left around the table, and the new guy was sitting on the chair next to him, looking at her. She had no choice but to sit next to him. As she sat down, he had the audacity to try and look up her skirt. She straightened her skirt as quickly as possible, but then his gaze only went up to her breasts. Alexis refrained from saying, "Hey, I'm up here." Instead, she put her hand in front of his face and introduced herself with an evil smile. A couple of weeks ago, Sandy actually interrupted Alexis's conversation with Susan in the break room. He was polite enough to ask if he could join their table, and neither Alexis nor Susan were able to tell him to leave. One of them politely said, "Okay." Then they did their best to ignore him and continue on their way. It took them a minute to realize that this freak was eavesdropping. They were laughing at something Alexis said about one of Jason's bad habits when they looked over to see Sandy smirking at her. Alexis scheduled a meeting with manager Hank Dolan for that afternoon to discuss Sandy Mason's incompetence and possible harassment. As luck would have it, Sandy Mason could be transferred, or better yet, fired. On Friday night, Sandy sat in front of his big screen TV, watching videos of Alexis Tyler that Sandy made with his smartphone. Today's technology is simply amazing. In high school, he was caught by a teacher following one of the cheerleaders down the stairs with his bulky camera. If they didn't want him to film under their skirts, why did they wear them so short? The vice principal admonished him for filming in a public place, which was clearly a ploy for the cheerleader to get filmed. None of this made sense to Sandy. He was suspended for 3 days, but was expelled when someone discovered his website with other videos and photos he had taken. Once they saw the website, it only took them a few minutes to figure out how he got the video from the girls' locker room. Sandy was arrested at age 15 and was lucky. His parents hired a great lawyer who fought hard to keep Sandy from having to register as a sex offender. Sandy got off with 3 years probation, and his arrest record was expunged when he turned 19. My God, what a wonderful woman. Sandy realized too late how bad Graves's audit report was. His mind was elsewhere most of the time he was looking through Portland's office books. Apparently, the only reason Mr. Dolan let Sandy go with just a warning was because Alexis was trying to protect him. That must be why she flew to Portland herself to straighten things out with Graves in person, so Sandy wouldn't have any problems with their manager. On Monday morning, he would pull his head out of his ass and focus on work to avoid getting into more trouble. If he lost his job, it would cost him all the hours of his day spent so close to Alexis. He'll have until Monday morning to determine what his next step will be in taking down Jason Tyler. On Saturday morning, Alexis and Jason were getting ready to go for a run. Alexis needed to burn off the anger she was feeling right now, and it was all directed at her weakling boss. Jason listened politely to Alexis's remarks. "I can't believe Hank let that creep get away with just a warning. My entire week was a waste of time due to Mason's incompetence. And when I told Hank about the harassment, he said I needed to talk to HR. Jason knew when to keep his mouth shut. Most men never understand this. How damn hard it is to be a woman in the workplace, especially a decent-looking woman. Jason knew he was one of the lucky ones, married to a beautiful woman who loved him and kept his wedding vows. She may not be 1 in a million, but she was definitely 1 in 1,000. 6 months after giving birth to her daughter Katie, Alexis was back to her pre-pregnancy weight. For a year, it was impossible to tell that she was carrying a full-term baby. Jason remembered that vacation in the Bahamas, their first time alone since Katie was born. Katie stayed with his parents. Alexis and Jason flew to Miami and boarded a ship to Nassau. 6 days and nights together in a tropical paradise. Alexis wore a bikini that Jason bought her from a Victoria's Secret catalog. Alexis surprised Jason by showing off her belly button piercing. She did it in a day about leaving for Miami, and he didn't notice it until she walked onto the deck of the boat in a revealing 2-piece suit. This holiday also marked the first time he saw Alexis sunbathing topless, first on a ship, later with a group of Germans, on a remote European-style beach. Since then, Alexis has continued to sunbathe topless on other beaches where it is allowed, or in her own backyard, and even once by a pool in Vegas. By the time Jason had finished his warm-up and was ready to go for a run, Alexis was starting to calm down. They went to the park, The park was a half-mile away and had a nice, running trail to the pond. At the north end of the park, there was a hill with a carved staircase. 290 steps up to the top of the hill. On good days, they could run all the way there and back without stopping. Jason and Alexis were on their way back and decided to walk the last mile. The stress of the past week has taken a toll on their energy. Jason watched the guy sitting on one of the park benches. The guy was holding the smartphone to his ear, but the angle was strange, and then it dawned on Jason. Jason had seen men do the same thing on more than one occasion at topless beaches, often with some pervert pretending to be talking on a cell phone when he was really just filming topless ladies. Twice in the past, Jason had approached such perverts and put them in their place with a caustic remark, causing the bastards to blush with shame. Jason watched the guy on the bench, wondering why he would take them off with Alexis, since Alexis's running outfit wasn't particularly sexy. Alexis was excited about Katie's upcoming visit and discussing their plans for the next 3 weeks, so she paid no attention to her surroundings. Jason interrupted her after they passed the man and asked her, "Did you notice that guy with the cell phone we just passed? I think he was using his smartphone to film us." Alexis turned around and quickly turned her head back. "Oh my God, it's Sandy Mason. What the hell? Is this the guy you reported for harassment? What is he filming us with? I told you there was something wrong with him. Should I go back and confront him? So what? He's sitting in a public park and we can't prove he was filming us unless you grab his phone before he runs away or deletes the image. I'll just add that to my report to HR on Monday morning. Alexis, I want you to start being more careful and keep your eyes open. I don't trust this guy. Start carrying that can of pepper spray I bought you. Don't argue with me now. Just do it." As much as Alexis hated the idea of carrying around that damn pipe of pepper spray, she knew Jason was right. Now she felt even more scared than yesterday. Jason didn't tell Alexis, but he realized that he had seen the guy on the park bench at least once before. Jason knew the police couldn't do anything to the guy sitting on the public bench, even if he was using his phone to take pictures. But Jason had other resources. As soon as he got home, he called the agency his brokerage firm used for investigations. He left a message for the owner to call him as soon as he received the message, but first on Monday morning. Alexis met with Clyde Walker from HR on Monday to tell him about her concerns, including seeing Sandy Mason in the park on Saturday and their suspicion that Sandy was using his phone to take pictures. As expected, Clyde said that this could not be used against Sandy, but Clyde would meet with Sandy on Tuesday and give him a general warning about unwanted attention towards female employees that could be considered harassment. "Are you going to tell him that I complained?" "No, Alexis. I will keep this a secret. We have the right to do this if given a warning. If things escalate, we may have to show him the signed complaint. If he hires a lawyer, the lawyer will insist on seeing the complaint. Hopefully the warning will be enough. To correct Sandy's behavior, I will personally look into this matter." Alexis left the meeting, hoping to see a change in Sandy's behavior and avoid further conflict. Alexis was raised by her saintly mother to try to see the best in people. Her mother always tried to justify people's bad behavior, suggesting that there must be a reason for such behavior. It was incomprehensible to her that some people could be simply evil. Alexis tried to live by her mother's philosophy. In high school, she was captain of the cheerleading team and homecoming queen. She tried to be merciful and thought she mostly succeeded, but bastards like Sandy Mason put her mother's teachings to the test. Since her first day in the conference room 6 months ago, her nerves had tingled every time she was near Sandy Mason in the department. Dave Phillips, owner of Phillips Investments, met with Jason at 11 in the morning. Dave always checked his car on the weekend, grabbed Jason's message on Saturday afternoon, and made an appointment for Monday morning. They both felt that the matter deserved immediate attention. "Dave, I need to find out everything I can about this guy Mason's past. Where is he from? What's in his past? Is he dangerous?" Alexis tells me that he showed up in her department 6 months ago and never talks to anyone about his personal life. She's been avoiding this guy, but several others in the department have tried to talk to him, to no avail. Dave took notes as Jason spoke, then looked up from his notepad and said, I'll call our lawyer this morning and have him contact Alexis's HR department. It would be in their best interest to give us some information about Mason, given that Alexis has filed a formal complaint, especially after the incident on Saturday morning. Our lawyer won't take no for an answer, or we'll sue. I don't know how thoroughly the company vetted Mason. We'll dig deeper. Thank you, Dave. I don't need to tell you how important this is to me. I told you about the break-in at our house. This whole thing is putting me on edge and I need answers. Consider it done. We'll start working on it today. I have some free time this week and I'll have Dwayne Larson, one of our best people, handle it. We'll find you the answers. What about the police? If and when we have something for them, we will share it with the police. Right now, we just have a colleague who was acting strange and was spotted in a public park twice. If they contact Mason right now with what we have, this may make him lay low and be more careful. You know, I just had an idea. Damn! A few weeks ago, a drone flew over our property and hovered over Alexis while she was sunbathing. Any chance it was Mason? I'll check it out. I think I read that some of the larger drones are registered with the FAA. If anything else comes to mind, these little parts that didn't connect before, call me on my cell. Any little bit will help if we'll end up going to the police. Meanwhile, would you feel more comfortable if we assigned a bodyguard for Alexis? Let's not do that for now. What doesn't make sense is, if it was Mason trying to break into our house, why did he do it while Alexis was on a business trip? He must have known she was in Portland. Yeah, you're right, it doesn't make sense. But one thing I've learned on this job, most of these crazy people do things that don't seem logical to anyone considered sane. Maybe hacking and stalking aren't related. We'll consider them connected until we know otherwise. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate you taking this up right away and paying personal attention to our concerns. What did you expect? Not only are you a client, you and Alexis have been our friends for years. With that, Jason and Dave stood up from their chairs, shook hands, and Jason walked out of Dave's office and headed down the street to his office. Jason found himself becoming more aware of his surroundings, including reflections in store windows as he passed by. Dave watched his friend leave and immediately picked up the phone. Alice, can you please ask Dwayne to come see me? Thank you. Sandy Mason became more and more irritated and angry. On Tuesday morning, he was called into the Human Resources Department and informed that a serious complaint had been filed against him alleging possible sexual harassment by one of the women in his department. He knew who complained. It had to be that bitch Susan Auster. He knew she was jealous of what he and Alexis shared. This bitch would pay for this, and he knew exactly how to make her pay. But Sandy's more pressing and critical problem was getting rid of Jason Tyler. Almost a week had passed since he tried to break into Tyler's house, and he still couldn't think of a better plan than the one that had failed. Returning to the house was not an option. He drove by Tyler's house Thursday night and saw the new ADT sign in the front yard. Sandy knew that some of these signs were fake, but he didn't think this one was fake. And why take the risk? No matter how much he thought about his options for killing Jason, they all involved an element of danger or the possibility of getting caught after committing the crime. What's the point of getting rid of Jason if he ends up in jail and can't marry Alexis? The thought of prison made Sandy shiver. Remembering how close he came to spending time in jail back in his school days always gave him the same reaction. But this time it triggered a thought in his mind. What if we didn't kill Jason, but just get him out of the way by framing him for a crime that would send him to prison for years? But the crime must be so terrible that Alexis will be forced to divorce him. What could it be? Sandy pondered his dilemma as he looked at the monitor in his cube. His decision to focus on work was forgotten. He then saw Alexis's reflection in his monitor. She walked past his cube and the solution presented itself. If he kills the Tyler's daughter and makes sure Jason is convicted of the crime, it will guarantee Alexis' divorce from Jason, and the bonus will be that Sandy won't be stuck with Jason's child. Sandy smiled to himself as he thought about it. This deserves some extra consideration, he thought to himself. With this new idea in mind, Sandy decided it was time to get revenge on Susan. Using an alias, he signed up for a dating site he had heard about from her. Within half an hour, he had found her profile, and Mr. Sam Martin, sent a request to meet Miss Susan Oster as soon as possible. With this accomplishment, Sandy sat back in his chair with a smug smile and was finally able to get back to work. Susan spent the first half of the week checking out Eugene's office, and it wasn't until Thursday afternoon that the two friends had a chance to sit down and do their own thing. Alexis shared what happened last Saturday at the park and Monday morning in HR. Susan couldn't help but notice how Alexis seemed to be looking around the cafe before she started speaking. Susan was stunned by the incident in the park, but not at all surprised by Clyde's inaction. Most of these HR guys were brainless. After a while, Alexis realized she was dominating the conversation and asked Susan about her date last weekend. Another online date? Another failure. He was a nice enough guy, but by the end of the evening, we both realized that we weren't what we were looking for. Hearing Susan talk about yet another bad experience broke Alexis's heart. Susan's first marriage broke up after she caught her husband cheating for the second time. Susan gave the guy a chance after the first time, office romance with his secretary and all that. The couple went to counseling after her husband begged Susan to give him another chance, but as they entered their second month of counseling, he found himself back in the secretary's saddle. Anyway, since Tuesday evening, I've been talking to what seems like a decent guy. We should meet soon. He has a big project at work and wants to get it over with first. He wrote that this should happen within the next week or so. Alexis looked at her friend and tried her best to sound positive. Well done. One day the right guy will make you a very happy woman. You deserve it. Alexis silently thanked her lucky stars once again that she wasn't in Susan's shoes. Given all the anxiety, most of the week was relatively quiet in the Tyler household. Thanks to the efforts of Dave Phillip, the security system was up and running. Katie will be home on Friday. Her final exam of the summer term was on Thursday, and Alexis and Jason were looking forward to the 3 weeks Katie had before returning to school for the fall term. Both Alexis and Jason took the next 2 weeks off to spend time with Katie at their cabin on Lake Wenatchee in eastern Washington. 2 weeks of hiking and fishing. For the second week, a guy came to visit Katie. It seemed that Katie was serious about this young man. Alexis hoped not too seriously. Katie was only 20. Jason was looking forward to babysitting the poor guy. Jason could be a big bad bear when it came to Katie, the perfect complement to lion mom Alexis. Luckily, Katie knew her parents did it out of love and accepted it with humor. Jason stopped by Dave Phillips' office on his way home on Friday. Dwayne told Jason what he had discovered so far. Sandy is a nickname. His real name is Sanders Austin Mason. He is 28 years old and was born in Vancouver, Washington. His previous employer was Exxon in Houston. We've been trying to get some information about why he left Exxon, but it's more complicated than breaking into the Pentagon. We have learned that as an adult, he has not been arrested or convicted in Texas or any other state. This is where things get dicey. We're pretty sure Mason has some information about the minors. He was enrolled in a public high school in Vancouver for his freshman and sophomore years, but his school's yearbook does not list him as a student. The following year, we checked local private schools and again found no record of him attending. His parents were still living in the same house at the time, but he was not enrolled in any local schools. Using the yearbook and the local telephone directory, we found a couple of former classmates. No one claimed to be a friend, but 2 of his classmates remember rumors of Sandy Mason taking upskirt photos. And there was even an unsubstantiated rumor about a hole in the girls' locker room. With this new idea in mind, Sandy decided it was time to get revenge on Susan. Using an alias, he signed up for a dating site he had heard about from her. Within half an hour, he had found her profile, and Mr. Sam Martin sent a request to meet Miss Susan Oster as soon as possible. With this accomplishment, Sandy sat back in his chair with a smug smile and was finally able to get back to work. Susan spent the first half of the week checking out Eugene's office, and it wasn't until Thursday afternoon that the two friends had a chance to sit down and do their own thing. Alexis shared what happened last Saturday at the park and Monday morning in HR. Susan couldn't help but notice how Alexis seemed to be looking around the cafe before she started speaking. Susan was stunned by the incident in the park, but not at all surprised by Clyde's inaction. Most of these HR guys were brainless. After a while, Alexis realized she was dominating the conversation and asked Susan about her date last weekend. Another online date? Another failure. He was a nice enough guy, but by the end of the evening, we both realized that we weren't what we were looking for. Hearing Susan talk about yet another bad experience broke Alexis's heart. Susan's first marriage broke up after she caught her husband cheating for the second time. Susan gave the guy a chance after the first time, office romance with his secretary and all that. The couple went to counseling after her husband begged Susan to give him another chance, but as they entered their second month of counseling, he found himself back in the secretary's saddle. Anyway, since Tuesday evening, I've been talking to what seems like a decent guy. We should meet soon. He has a big project at work and wants to get it over with first. He wrote that this should happen within the next week or so. Alexis looked at her friend and tried her best to sound positive. Well done. One day the right guy will make you a very happy woman. You deserve it. Alexis silently thanked her lucky stars once again that she wasn't in Susan's shoes. Given all the anxiety, most of the week was relatively quiet in the Tyler household. Thanks to the efforts of Dave Phillip, the security system was up and running. Katie will be home on Friday. Her final exam of the summer term was on Thursday, and Alexis and Jason were looking forward to the 3 weeks Katie had before returning to school for the fall term. Both Alexis and Jason took the next 2 weeks off to spend time with Katie at their cabin on Lake Wenatchee in eastern Washington. 2 weeks of hiking and fishing. For the second week, a guy came to visit Katie. It seemed that Katie was serious about this young man. Alexis hoped not too seriously. Katie was only 20. Jason was looking forward to babysitting the poor guy. Jason could be a big bad bear when it came to Katie, the perfect complement to lion mom Alexis. Luckily, Katie knew her parents did it out of love and accepted it with humor. Jason stopped by Dave Phillips' office on his way home on Friday. Dwayne told Jason what he had discovered so far. Sandy is a nickname. His real name is Sanders Austin Mason. He is 28 years old and was born in Vancouver, Washington. His previous employer was Exxon in Houston. We've been trying to get some information about why he left Exxon, but it's more complicated than breaking into the Pentagon. We have learned that as an adult, he has not been arrested or convicted in Texas or any other state. This is where things get dicey. We're pretty sure Mason has some information about the minors. He was enrolled in a public high school in Vancouver for his freshman and sophomore years, but his school's yearbook does not list him as a student. The following year, we checked local private schools and again found no record of him attending. His parents were still living in the same house at the time, but he was not enrolled in any local schools. Using the yearbook and the local telephone directory, we found a couple of former classmates. No one claimed to be a friend, but 2 of his classmates remember rumors of Sandy Mason taking upskirt photos. And there was even an unsubstantiated rumor about a hole in the girls' locker room. The rest of the evening passed in a whirlwind of chatter. Katie barely had time to eat as she talked about the events of the past semester, especially demonstratively telling her parents about the amazing young man she was dating. I think Charles Owen was in his final year of engineering, in the ROTC, and planning to join the Army as a twin lieutenant right after graduation. Listening to all the wonderful qualities of this young man, Jason silently told himself that he had better prepare for the young man's visit. Jason had a sneaking suspicion that he would soon be introduced to his future son-in-law. Katie asked about the break-in. This was a point Jason had been struggling with ever since he met the detectives. On the one hand, he didn't want to scare the hell out of either Alexis or Katie, but on the other hand, he didn't want them to underestimate the potential threat. Jason recounted the details of the night of the break-in. When he told her how he threatened an intruder with a shotgun, Katie looked at her mom, knowing how her mom felt about firearms. Katie actually laughed at Jason's scream on the stairs. "Come here. I have a little surprise for you." Dad, this is too funny. What is this? Something from one of your Bruce Willis movies. I don't know, honey, it just sounded right at the moment. Either way, it seemed to have the desired effect. 2 seconds later, I heard the screen door slam. Thank God I've never shot a living creature. In my life. Who knows how I would have reacted if it had come to that? After Jason's last sentence, the dining room was silent for a few moments. Alexis broke the tension by telling Jason and Katie to clear the plates. She loaded the dishwasher while they spent some one-on-one time. Both Katie and Jason thought it was a great idea. Each of them wanted to say something without disturbing Alexis. Katie, let's take a walk around the block. As they walked, Jason spoke first. Look, I didn't want to worry your mother too much, but this Mason character might be a little more dangerous than I said there. One of the detectives heads to Mason's last home and place of work next week. I hope to get more information on this asshole before your mother returns to work in 2 weeks. At least I made your mother carry a canister of mace when she's alone in the garage. I bought a canister for you too. I hope I can convince you to carry it, just in case. It was Katie's turn to share what she wasn't ready to share with her mother. Dad, I hope this doesn't make you think badly of Charles, but he taught me how to use a gun. I have a concealed carry permit and a 9mm semi-automatic pistol. I will go to the shooting range with Charles. I'm quite experienced. You keep the mace, I'll keep my Smith & Wesson. Jason was shocked for a minute, but recovered quickly enough to ask, So where is he now? I can't imagine what your mother would say if she knew there was a gun in the house or cabin. I have it in my bedroom, with a trigger lock to keep it safe when it's out of my sight. The key is in my pocket. Well, I hate hiding anything from your mom, but give me some time to figure out how we're going to convince your mom to allow this in the house. Let's keep it to ourselves for now. The more Sandy contemplated killing Katie Tyler, the more reasons he found not to go through with it. First, the case against Jason must be very strong, which is quite a difficult task. Secondly, if Tyler had lived, not only would he and Alexis not have received Jason's life insurance, but Jason could have spent thousands on lawyers for the trial. All of Tyler's assets will disappear. Sandy hoped that these assets and insurance would help them start a new life. Sandy did not really like to work, and having enough money could lead an idle life. No, killing Katie and framing Jason won't work. Let's go back to plan A, kill Jason. Be more simple. One night, approach Jason on the street, pretend it's a robbery gone wrong, and kill him. There was nothing to connect Sandy to Jason, so why did the police suspect him? Sandy was half the smart guy. Just to make sure the police were treating the murder as a robbery, he went out Saturday night and spray-painted 2 buildings with gang graffiti. He was pleased with himself as he watched the local news on Sunday. A reporter was standing in front of one of the buildings. She uttered the typical hysteria. What does the increase in activity of this gang mean for the safety of the citizens of our community? Thank God for slow news. The following week, on Tuesday evening, Susan Auster came out of the living room feeling a little tipsy. Susan didn't believe she was too drunk to drive home. It had been a long day, and the evening had been a bad one. Sam Martin, her boyfriend from an online dating site, was supposed to meet her in the living room during their first meeting, but did not show up. Susan was too upset to eat, and 2 Cosmos hit her in the head. Susan opened the car and was confused when a sweet-smelling rag covered her face. As she fell to the ground, 2 arms supported her and threw her into the back seat before she lost consciousness. When Susan woke up, the first thing she saw was Sandy Mason looking at her from between the 2 front seats of her car. She tried to move, but her arms and legs were tied. The shoulder strap also prohibited movement. Susan's eyes adjusted to the darkness until they focused on the gun in Mason's hand, pointed at her. Sandy, what are you doing? Let me go. Susan's voice was tense, but the gravity of her situation was just beginning to hit her as her mind emerged from the fog. Susan, first tell me why you complained about me at work. What are you talking about? I never complained about you. Why do you say that? Don't lie to me, bitch. I know it was you who told HR that I was stalking you. Why should I do this? You never bothered me. It was Alexis who complained to HR when you didn't stop harassing her. As soon as the words left her mouth, she knew she had messed up. But in her defense, she was still disoriented. You are lying. Alexis loves me. She would never do that. Alexis loves you? What are you talking about? What I'm saying is that as soon as Jason is out of the picture, Alexis and I will get married. Susan was stunned by the words that came out of Mason's mouth. How could this idiot be so delusional? Listen, Sandy, just let me go. I didn't report you to HR, and I promise that I will never say a word about it to anyone. Just please let me go. Sandy Mason was confused. He needed time to think. He opened the car door and walked into the parking lot at the trailhead. At 1 o'clock in the morning, their car was the only one in the parking lot. They were miles from the nearest person, and there was no need to shut Susan up as he walked around the trailhead parking lot, trying to collect his thoughts. 10 minutes later, he returned, Susan looking at him before the light in the dome went out, returning them to darkness. Okay, I'll let you go. But you must answer my questions and remember your promise not to tell anyone about tonight. Agree? Susan could only nod her head in agreement. She answered the questions, somehow thinking that maybe Sandy would let her live if she did. She was scared and clutching at straws. Sandy's original plan was to make Susan suffer before she died, but now he felt sorry for her. She was just an innocent bystander in this melodrama. Of course, she would still have to die, but instead of torturing her, he would put her back to sleep first. Having received the necessary information, Sandy got out of the car, opened a bottle of chloroform, and poured some onto a rag. For a moment, Susan thought she had gotten her wish, but when Sandy opened the back door, Susan recognized the smell. No, please no. Sorry, Susan. Well, it's time to pay back that bitch Alexis and her family for treating him. Sandy couldn't wait to see the look in Alexis's eyes as her world crumbled right in front of her. A madman's smile crossed his lips as he drove Susan's car home to Google Earth for the address she had given him in his last moments of hope. Shed in the woods? How much better could it be? This put the whole gang-style murder plan on the back burner. Due to an important court appearance, Dwayne Larson didn't arrive in Houston until Tuesday. The original law firm he was referred to back in Seattle refused to accept the assignment due to a conflict of interest. Dwayne was disappointed at first. He assumed it had been arranged by Seattle lawyers before he arrived here. Fortunately, the Houston firm was kind enough to give Duane a second recommendation, and by Wednesday afternoon, Duane was in Schuler and Simmons's office explaining the situation. George Schuler agreed to attend any meetings Dwayne might have with the Exxon people. Feeling better, Dwayne contacted Exxon and set up a meeting with the Vice President of Employee Relations on Thursday morning. Dwayne confirmed that George Schuler was available and used the time before the meeting to research the computer at the local library. Thursday morning found Dwayne and George at Howard Grimley's office in Exxon. Grimley greeted the two men warmly, asked if they would like coffee, tea, or a soft drink, and then asked them to have a seat. Given the topic, Dwayne was surprised when Grimley didn't close the office door. Deputy Grimley was sitting right outside the door and could hear everything that was said. Mr. Larson, Mr. Schuler, immediately after your phone call requesting a meeting, I pulled up Sanders Mason's personnel file and met with our in-house attorney. Unfortunately, I have been prohibited from allowing you to view the file or discuss the contents of the file unless we receive a subpoena. Both Dwayne and George looked at each other, silently wondering why Grimley hadn't saved them time by explaining it over the phone. Grimley continued, However, let me assure you that Exxon will fully cooperate with any subpoena. We will not attempt to block the subpoena in any way. Mr. Larson, I don't know the full extent of your investigation, but I'm not surprised to hear that someone is interested in looking into Mr. Mason's background. I can't say more. I'm very sorry. Dwayne couldn't help but read Grimley's body language. It was obvious that Grimley was handling the file almost like a trainer would dangle a fish in front of an aquarium seal. At least that's the impression he got. Dwayne decided that the meeting was over, stood up from his chair. Both men shook Grimley's hand and walked out the door with the intention of receiving a subpoena. Dwayne knew it would take at least another day and cost thousands. Even then, there was no guarantee of success. Dwayne hoped that George knew a friendly judge. As he passed the assistant's desk, she stood up and offered to walk them to the front door of the building. The elevator ride was quiet, but just before Dwayne exited through the revolving door, the assistant shook Dwayne's hand and said, "Let's have lunch, Mr. Larson, just the two of us." Dwayne felt the piece of paper in his hand and simply nodded. While George called a taxi, Dwayne took the opportunity to look at the sheet. There was a phone number there. 2 hours later, Dwayne sat at a quiet table across from Grimley's assistant, Elaine Stewart. "I know your lawyer is working on getting a subpoena, but there is something you need to know about Sandy Mason that isn't on file. Aren't you afraid of getting into trouble with your boss by meeting me?" "No, Mr. Grimley actually asked me to meet you. He's one of the good guys. His hands are tied by law, but he will do everything he can to help you protect that lady in the north. When we got rid of Mason, he was afraid that we would throw the jar down the road, but without police action, there was little we could do. When a Seattle firm called asking for recommendations, Mr. Grimley did his best to advise them without violating company rules. Politics. I heard his end of the conversation, but obviously whoever he was talking to was either too dumb or simply ignored subtle warnings. There is documentation on file of 2 warnings Mason received for harassing 2 women in his department. Mr. Grimley was in the process of terminating Mason when he abruptly tendered his resignation and left with less than a week's notice. We were glad the whole episode was over, but a week later we received an inquiry regarding Mason from the Houston Police Department, who were investigating at the request of the Mexican Police Department. Tamaulipas State Police are investigating the death of a woman whose body was found in the desert. The police were looking for Mason. He left Texas rather suddenly. Mr. Grimley called the police when he got a call from Seattle, but that's the last we heard from the police or anyone else until your office called us last week. So, you don't know what happened to the Mexican police investigation? Well, this is the worst thing. Unofficially, Mr. Grimley asked me to follow him because my brother-in-law is a policeman, and this is what I found out. The woman was a Mexican citizen, but had a work visa in Texas. There was evidence that she met Sandy Mason on a dating site, and her friends thought she was dating Mason, but ended the relationship after the second date. I don't understand why she was found in Mexico. She avoided crossing the border except to visit her family on Sundays and always returned to the U.S. before dark. Mexican police wanted to talk to Mason because their records showed that Mason had entered the country a few days before the body was discovered by a farmer. There was no record of her entering the country. There was not enough evidence to extradite Mason. But they asked Houston police to question him. Houston detectives interviewed Mason once. The day before, Mason tendered his resignation to us. A week later, a detective came to our office looking for Mason. They planned to interview him again, but his apartment was empty. We told him everything we knew, which wasn't much. As I said, this is the last we heard from the police. My brother-in-law said that if Mason returned to Mexico, a warrant would be issued for his arrest. Dwayne and Miss Stewart finished lunch, Miss Stewart jotting down a few things here and there in response to Dwayne's questions. They parted ways, and Dwayne called his boss in Seattle with the news. Dave Phillips called Jason as soon as he hung up with Dwayne, but his call went to voicemail. That same Thursday, Sandy drove past Tyler's cabin, wondering why life was so unfair and when he would get a break. One of the cars parked in the driveway last night was not there, which meant that neither Alexis nor Tyler's girlfriend were in the house. It would have been nice to get it over with last night, but as Sandy approached the cabin, a motion-activated light came on and illuminated the yard. This morning, Jason Tyler was mowing his front lawn, and Sandy drove by. Google Earth gave him a good idea of where the nearest cabins were, and a quick drive past the neighbors confirmed that they were not nearby and posed no threat to his plans. Sandy continued down the gravel road, parked his car in the state park lot, removed his mountain bike from the back rack, and headed down the path along the lake. Sandy assumed the bike would attract less attention and be easier to hide. Over the sound of the mower, Jason thought he heard a scream. Looking up, he could have sworn he saw two people through the large, panoramic plate glass window. Surprised for a moment, Jason made a potentially fatal mistake. He pressed the shut-off button on the lawnmower, ran across the lawn, and rushed into the cabin. Katie turned onto the gravel path to the cabin. Something was wrong. In all the years she had lived at home, she could not remember a single time that her father had left a tool on the lawn, but the lawn mower was lying there. Was she just paranoid about her father's warnings about her mother's stalker? How does this guy even know where they were this week? She didn't know why, but as she sat in the car and thought, she realized that it was also strange that neither her father nor her mother came to the door to greet her. This is exactly what they always did for her or for each other. For a second, Katie thought about the worst-case scenario. Her mom and dad decided to take advantage of her absence and spend some private time. But that didn't explain the presence of the lawnmower. Of course, her parents weren't so passionate anymore that they couldn't wait a few seconds to put away their tools. Paranoid or not, Katie simply sensed something, pulled the gun out of her purse, and pulled the slide back to chamber the hollow point. She held the gun in her hand, her finger off the trigger as Charles had taught her, and secretly hid it in her shopping bag. Katie got out of the car, walked up the steps, and entered the house. Katie realized she was wrong. "Come in, little lady. You must be Katie." Jason and Alexis were sitting on a couch in a large room, and behind them, a wild-eyed man with a gun sat on a bar stool. The gun was pointed at the back of her mother's head. "Come on," I said. "Come on in and join this party. Your mother deceived me, made me think she was interested in me, but she kept laughing with that bitch Susan Oster. Susan doesn't laugh anymore, and in a few hours your mother won't laugh either. Come in." Katie didn't move. She tried her best to think about everything Charles had taught her over the past year. She had a clear shot at Mason, but knew she couldn't raise the gun fast enough to avoid hitting her mother first. Charles taught her that it wasn't like the movies. It was almost impossible to get a shot before the bad guy pulled the trigger. Mason misunderstood Katie's lack of movement. "You are afraid? Can't move from fear? This will be more fun than I originally planned. I guess I'll have to play with you a little first. Your father isn't such a brave man without his shotgun." Mason looked at Jason and waved the gun between Alexis and Jason's heads. "I have something for you." Mason laughed sinisterly and looked back at Katie. "And just because I can, I'll let your mom and dad watch. A bullet in their knees to keep them alive, but immobilize them." Mason continued to laugh, climbed off the bar stool and began to walk around the couch, getting into shooting positions on his knees. Jason first, since Mason considered him the bigger threat. From this perspective, Mason could not effectively monitor Katie and her parents at the same time. Katie thought this was her best chance. Katie dropped the bag from her hands and began to raise the gun. The sound of a bag hitting the floor switched Mason's attention from Jason to Katie, if only for a second. But a second is all Katie needs. Her eyes saw through the sights of her S&W 9mm Shield semi-automatic. Mason's eyes widened as he realized what he was seeing. His hand reached towards Katie to point his Glock. She was the bigger of the threats now. But he was too late. Katie didn't think about the consequences when her finger pressed the trigger, as she had been taught and trained for months on the shooting range, although this is justified. The first bullet hit Sandy Mason in the chest, but even as Mason felt the bullet enter his body, he heard the sound of a second shot. In addition to pulling the trigger correctly, Katie took another lesson. Charles taught her seriously, never let them retreat. Eliminate the threat. Mason's legs gave way and he collapsed to the floor. Later, Jason had moments of doubt about his bravery and masculinity. He wondered if he should have attacked Mason before his daughter returned home. He thought it over. Did he know that Kathy would come with her gun? Is that why he didn't act sooner? Deep down, he knew the answer. Moments before Katie dropped her bag, Jason was about to jump off the couch in a last-ditch attempt to take Mason's gun, despite the slim chance that such a move would succeed. Someone was looking out for him and his family. The bag fell milliseconds before he moved. For now, Jason was just happy that his two girls were alive and well. He grabbed Alexis and held her tightly to his chest, then reached for Katie to join them. Katie had the presence of mind to pull around from the chamber of her gun before joining her. Alexis saw what she was doing, and suddenly, it dawned on her what Katie had done. The shock began to wear off. "Where did this gun come from?" Jason and Katie looked at each other shyly before Jason replied, "Later, honey. Just be glad our little girl knows how to use it. I look forward to meeting Charles to thank him for his part in saving my family." State troopers and county sheriffs started showing up within half an hour of Tyler's 911 call. It was pretty cut and dry about what happened and how Katie fired in self-defense. Mason's car was found another half hour later, and its contents answered many questions about both the Tyler case and two unsolved murders in Florida and Mexico. It would be 2 more days before Susan's body was found. Mason had mementos from all 3 of his murders. Additionally, videos and photographs of hundreds of unsuspecting women were found on flash drives locked in a suitcase. The dates in the images cover the last 12 years. In the trunk was a stolen Ontario license plate, Canadian maps, and a guide to the Caribbean and Venezuela. Sandy Mason apparently planned to escape through Canada and end up hiding somewhere where he wouldn't be caught. 4 days later, Jason sat on the back porch, drinking beer and watching the moon rise over the lake. The moon was at first quarter, and the sky was dark enough for him to see 1,000,000 stars. As Jason sat and looked up, a shooting star flew past the Milky Way. Jason remembered a saying from his youth, "Make a wish on a falling star." "No, thank you. I already got my wish." He said a small prayer of thanks as he looked back into the cabin. At the table, illuminated only by a candle, sat his wife, daughter, and Charles. Charles arrived earlier that day. Jason was not at all surprised that he and Alexis immediately liked the young man. He was smart, respectful, and clearly in love with Katie. Jason's rude papa bear turned into a teddy bear before dinner was over. Alexis was amused by Jason's behavior, so different from how Jason had approached Katie's previous dates. Jason even agreed when Charles offered to take him to the local gun range to teach him how to use a gun properly. Alexis refused when he offered her the same training. She now agreed to allow the gun to be carried in her home, but was not prepared to fire it. Time will tell if she changes her mind, but for now it was a small victory when she agreed that if guns were outlawed, only criminals would have guns. As Jason sat on the back porch, finishing his beer and feeling blessed, the screen door opened, and Alexis came out with a couple more bottles in her hands. She handed one to Jason before sitting down next to him. Jason took a sip from the bottle. "This is my 4th beer tonight. I'll get up at least once tonight to get rid of it." "Well, when you get back to bed, don't be afraid to wake me up. When was the last time we were at midnight?" Jason smirked, but before he could respond, the door opened. Charles and Katie got out and headed towards the lake. "We're going out on the boat and maybe going for a swim," Jason and Alexis responded simultaneously. "Be careful." Alexis laughed and looked into her husband's eyes. "I like him. I can tell you do too. It's good that he's here. He'll help Katie take her mind off what happened last week." Sandy Mason deserved to die. I wish it wasn't our daughter who did it. She had a couple of sleepless nights last weekend. We were just in the kitchen and Katie was sharing some of her feelings. Charles held her hands. He let her cry one more time. This young man is more mature than his years. "How did we get so lucky, Jason? I think about Susan all the time and how sad it is. She was such a sweet woman and her life was so tragic. I cry when I think about how her life ended." Jason knew there was no answer, so he put his arm around Alexis and just held his wife.